Hi, today I have Steve Ostrowski as a guest, and he's a widely published poet. He has two publishing companies that he works with, Inspire and La Fora. And La Fora is actually a company that's here based in Connecticut. So he's a novelist, a short story writer, a painter, and a songwriter. Professor Emeritus at Central Connecticut State University. Steve previously taught classes there. Creative writing was his favorite, is what he told me. And then he also is very fond of Flannery O'Connor and taught a class specifically on her. He now spends his time working on creative projects, playing hockey, and enjoying his growing family. He also trained high school English teachers. So we have a lot of things to cover here, Steve. So let's get started. How do you choose your publishing company, first of all? Because I think everybody is like, I have a great story, but how do I get it published? Maybe let's just start there.
Yeah.
And thank you for being here today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm thrilled. The Highway of Spirit and Bone is a novel.
You can hold it up so people can see, and people can see what it looks like, the cover of it. And it's a really beautiful cover. So it looks like there's either moon or sunset in the back, and it looks like there's a car going down the highway, and it looks like there's roads that aren't quite connected. So that's kind of a little
undulating roads.
There you go. That's a little bit telling right there what it might be about, right?
Well, that's really interesting. I never thought of it that way, but that's very true. It's a road trip story where adult son and his lesbian sister are driving their elderly mother across the country to live with another sister.
Oh boy. They're driving the mother.
They're driving the mother.
Are driving their mother to find a new home.
She's going to live in Arizona with another sister.
Oh boy.
And as they're driving, they get into all kinds of
mischief,
adventures, and a lot of long-held secrets, and a lot of resentments, and a lot of things start coming out as they travel. And the lesbian sister has just broken up with her girlfriend, her partner, who is a cop, and the broken up girlfriend is taking it very hard, and so she actually starts trailing them. She has a gun.
Oh boy.
And so there's that aspect of it too. So there's a lot going on in the book.
And based on any truth to this experience, did you ever take your mom or older relative and rehome them?
When I was doing research for this book, which, by the way, I started writing in 2003. So for the writers out there who...
it takes a while. You don't
be patient. Yeah, sometimes good things happen after a while.
You don't just press print or submit and have it...
And I'll talk about... I'll talk about the publisher who did finally take this, which I'm grateful for. But they're traveling across country with all these things happening. You asked if it's related to anything that...
Sure.
I like to say it's purely fiction.
Okay.
But a lot of the characters are loosely based on people I've known.
Of course. It's hard not to, right? I mean, the people that you travel with, or time in a car over a long period of time, it starts out like real fun. It's kind of like a marriage. After a while, it's maybe not so.
Well, you have your struggles,
thrilling, and it's a little bit up and down.
Up and down, yeah, of course. Very much that kind of thing. But as the plot started unfolding as I was writing, it got further and further away from anything that's ever really happened, and it just became kind of like almost, writers say this all the time, when the writing is going well, it's almost like you're just a conduit.
Exactly.
The story is coming down from God or from from the muse.
The muse,
and
I think,
and
right.
then you're just typing away or writing away and trying to to get it while it's
And to keep it as
Yeah.
fast and as clear as you possibly can.
yeah. So so I'm thrilled that it's out there. It's
When did it get published? Is it fairly recent?
yeah. It was in the fall of 2023.
Oh, wow.
So it's still new. It's gotten excellent reviews on Amazon. And I would urge anyone who's watching to check them out, because it's the one thing about the publisher that published it, Lafora Books, in a very small publisher here in Connecticut.
How do we spell Lafora?
Lefora.
Okay.
And basically, it's two former English teachers who've retired, and they wanted to publish some of their own work, and they wanted to publish other people who they felt were good enough to be published, but were having trouble. The publishing world is very difficult to break into. So they opened a call for local writers, anyone in New England actually, to send in their work, and they would check it out. And they accepted Highway of Spirit and Bone. We worked on editing and making sure it was in its best shape for about a year, and then it was published.
And they actually helped you with the whole editing process because
we would meet on Sunday afternoons and let's go over chapter 1, and if they had any concerns like, could you make this a little better or do this, so
Nice.
they were very helpful in that way. We didn't make a lot of changes. The book actually had lived for almost 20 years, so and I had frequently gone through it and reworked it and sent it out to places. And had an agent for a while, but she couldn't sell it. So, so it's had a long history.
Well, congratulations! That's very exciting, and you've done it. So
Yeah.
you are in print in your name, and then you go on. And your legacy is there, out there, and
Yeah. No, I'm thrilled. I published a lot more poetry than fiction in my life.
And tell me about poetry. Why poetry? People are kind of like, oh, I'm not a poet, but there's so many different varieties of poets. And, I love Ogden Nash, and I love Longfellow, and I love Yeats. I mean, and Mary Oliver. There's just so many different styles and types.
The poetry tent is very big. You're right.
Because you can't just say I don't like poetry, because Ogden Nash just makes you laugh out loud whenever you hear one of his poems. He's just so clever with his words.
Sure. A lot of people, when they hear poetry, they like, oh, I don't understand it, I don't like poetry because it's too weird or strange. But
it's boiled down, I think, is the thing that I think is so important. It's just titrated. It's like maple syrup. You take all of that sap from the tree, and then you actually boil it down. It's like 40 gallons down to 1 gallon, basically, right?
Yes,
you actually
exactly.
get that sweet
really
stuff.
tightly condensed and cut off all the excess.
Is there a poem here that you want to share with us? Is there
Sure.
one that you really, really like that really speaks to you?
I'll read the first one.
Okay.
I like them all.
Of course.
But I'll read the first one because it's, I call this book Life Field because when I was a young boy, not too far from where we lived, this was on Staten Island.
Okay.
Big field, and a rotted old trestle ran through it, and there were woods, and there were open fields, and there were streams, and
You spent a lot of time there.
I spent a lot of time. I think it was the primary nurturer of my imagination.
I'm sure.
And
You like nature, and you observed it, and you breathed it, and lived it.
Yeah, I liked nature. I liked wildness, and I liked not knowing what was around the bend. And I liked danger. Climbing the trestle, you could easily fall off.
Oh,
It
boy.
was falling apart, but we used to do it almost every day.
You fell? Did you actually jump or fall?
I never hurt myself. I'm sure I fell, but
That's part of the adventure.
It's
You
just-
wanted that, yeah.
that place just etched itself in my mind. It appears in so many of my poems, whether I'm planning to or not. So.
Well, that's where you grew up.
Yeah, it's where I grew up. It's where, my friends, my brothers, I had a lot of brothers. We all, the fields was our kind
Nice.
of home away from home, you might say.
How many brothers did you have?
I had 4 brothers and 1 sister.
Nice.
4 girls.
Nice,
yeah.
nice, nice. Yeah, yeah. Okay, let's hear.
All right. This is called What is a Life Field? It's the first poem in the book. What is a life field? I don't know. A calendar in dirt, yellow grass and dark trees, pricker bushes and boulders, a boy, curly-haired, cautious, reckless, climbing a rotted trestle, torn page of Playboy, folded like money in the back pocket of his moist dungarees. A stone wall, like a long sentence written backward in time. A stream singing, that boy nearby panting, sweat dripping off his curls, the sexy, soft voice of a never-ever girl.
Nice,
Thank
nice, nice. Yeah, I could see it. I could feel it. It was nice. Yeah.
Oh, good,
yeah,
thank you.
Yeah.
I like to create images and let the space between the images speak for themselves in a way. Like I don't like poetry personally that's too explanatory. That doesn't let the reader do any of the work. Yeah.
Or the listener, right? Have you narrated this? Have you put this on for Audible so that people can hear it? Have you done that yet?
No.
Yeah,
No.
yeah. I always love hearing poetry or a book, a piece of work by the author, him or herself, and hearing how
Yeah, me too.
Yes.
Because they know exactly what words
Images.
they want to, emphasize or
yep.
de-emphasize. Or,
Absolutely.
Yeah, the music of the words. Yeah.
I like that, the music of the words. That's really interesting.
I think poetry succeeds at least partially on its music. So that, I think it aspires to music, good poetry.
Well, you said Bob Dylan was one of your favorite
Yeah.
people of all time, and
Bob.
everybody knows Bob Dylan was just such a great guy. What's his real name? Zimmerman?
Robert Zimmerman,
Robert
yeah.
Zimmerman from Minnesota, right?
Yeah.
And
Way up in
changed his
near
name
Duluth.
to Bob Dylan and became famous, but his lyrics, talk about that. His lyrics were just so phenomenal and really poetry, right?
Absolutely. He was influenced by poets like the beat poets Allen Ginsberg and
Well, probably Dylan
Dylan
Thomas,
Thomas,
right?
yeah.
Isn't that how he probably took
I
his
think
name? I don't
supposedly.
know.
He's never fully owned up to that, but that's the speculation that Dylan Thomas was would make a good last name.
Pretty influential, absolutely.
Yeah, and Dylan Thomas's poetry is full of music.
So what are-
I sat or lay on the floor outside my older brother's bedroom when I was a boy.
they
'Cause
were
he would-
older than you,
they were
so
older
you were
than
the
me,
younger one. Yeah.
I was the second to youngest.
Okay.
I have one younger brother, and my brother Michael in particular would be playing records on his record player in his room, and I would just lay on the floor outside. He was kind of private, but I would lay on the floor outside the room when the door was closed and just listen to the records he was playing. And often he would be playing Bob Dylan, Neil Young,
Sure.
people
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, just that it spoke to me.
Of course it did.
Hard rains are going to fall. I mean, I remember listening to that and just verse after verse after verse of this incredible poetry. Desolation Row, all this stuff. It just, like the feels, the Bob Dylan's music just got into me and started shaping me. And,
That's very powerful. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Other famous or people who were influential in your writing career, people that
I got to study with Allen Ginsberg at
Okay.
Brooklyn College,
Nice.
and that was quite a trip. He with just a small seminar of us, and he was very generous, very comfortable being himself. His own strangeness, his own proclivities and everything. He was right up front, and I think his authenticity was something I admired.
Well, isn't that what it is at the end of the day when you're writing, or when you're, especially if you're doing poetry, but any kind of writing where it's just you being authentic and being genuine with the words and the experience and the feeling, and trying to encapsulate that into how a paragraph or a sentence. Isn't that basically?
Absolutely, it is, and I think it's why a lot of people ultimately don't write, because you have to be authentic, and you have to take risks. I think when I wrote The Highway of Spirit and Bone, when I published The Highway of Spirit and Bone, I was a little nervous about how some people were going to respond to it.
Sure.
Because there are some scenes in there that are, that are
A little raw,
a
maybe
little
a little bit
uncomfortable,
natural.
a little raw.
Yeah.
Scenes that, again, as I was writing, they were the scenes that needed to be written. I didn't plan them necessarily, but when I saw my main character getting into this position and finding himself doing this and that, I had to go with it. And I kind of knew, like, okay, people may think this is you, and they may, think less of you because this character is not a 100% perfect person in any way.
Of course not.
He's flawed.
Well, I always say every saint was a sinner, and every sinner is a saint,
Yeah.
So
And
it's just...
Yeah, I love that. I think it puts it takes a lot of the pressure off to be someone you're not, when you can just say, yeah, I'm a flawed person. I have my good points and my not so good points, and I think characters, we want to read about characters who are interesting and are honest.
And probably are flawed.
And,
we don't
have to be flawed.
Yeah, we don't want to read about the perfect character.
Where would Shakespeare be if there were
oh my gosh,
characters
right?
didn't have flaws?
Yeah.
So, but it was risky. I was a little bit concerned, like, oh, I hope certain people don't read it. And then they did read it, and they were like, Stephen, I love this book.
Nice. Well, my niece is a published author, and her children, she's got one in high school, two in high school, one in college now, and they were like, Mommy swears, is what they said.
Yes.
And her mom, the grandmother of the kids said, no, your mom doesn't swear, but her characters do.
Swear.
It's really different.
Yeah,
you really have to
absolutely.
point that out.
That's a good point.
Talk to me about the therapeutic components of writing. Why is writing important? Even if you keep a journal, or why should people write, or why do you think people write?
Carrying a lot inside of you can get overwhelming.
Sure.
If you're walking around with all your conflicts or all your questions,
that's really interesting.
Always inside you, boy, that gets to be, that's like a steam thing, building up, and
a steam
it's
cooker.
got a pressure. So it's gotta have a release.
And writing does that.
Writing is a
You
great
see that
release.
writing does that for people. Yeah.
I think so. I think people who keep journals and diaries.
Absolutely.
It's also a way. It's also a placeholder. You can't. You might have great ideas, but you can't retain them, in the day-to-day life all the time. So
There's
get it down
too
on
much.
paper.
Yeah.
It's there. Then you can do other things and go back to it.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons writing developed thousands of years ago, in order for people to remember things and then continue to do other things.
That's really interesting. That's why we have lists. That's why there were hieroglyphics back in the day.
I love the to-do list. That's thanks to my wife, Susan, who taught me the value of to-do lists.
Well, and speaking of Susan, I know she's a speech pathologist, and that's my wheelhouse. Like, I'm a speech pathologist.
Yeah.
And I always said if you talk about things, then it's almost cemented into who you are. And if you write it, there's kind of that, what you just said already, almost a release where you kind of own it, but you don't. It's almost like from a 20,000-foot view or 60,000-foot vantage point, where it's a little bit different.
Yes, totally. I used to tell my students when you wanted to really retain something,
Repeat it.
discuss it,
Yep.
write it, discuss it and write it, write it down because thinking you're going to keep it in your head is not likely.
Right. Right.
Talking about it with someone else as you just said, reinforces it, puts it, solidifies it, and then writing it down really does the trick. So
Interesting.
yeah.
Interesting.
it's a good way to study.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. To remember things,
Yeah.
and absolutely. And tell me about what you gave for advice or lessons for your students. Like how do we develop writers? Like you said that you help
Yeah.
high school English teachers, train high school English teachers. Is what you said you did.
I
As part
trained
of
high
your
school
career.
English teachers and taught creative writing, and a lot of times those overlap
Of course.
because, well, one of the things I developed, I used to do a summer program with my friend Linda at Central called for the National Writing Project, ours was called the Central Connecticut Writing Project. National Writing Project has arms all over the country, and we bring in teachers of all different disciplines, from elementary all the way, even pre-elementary, all the way up through college, and give them 2 weeks to be writers themselves, and to develop new ways of teaching writing, but also to write their own stuff, which the busy life of a teacher often doesn't allow that. And it was a tremendous success. One of the things I developed once, when I noticed that a lot of teachers, even English teachers, were afraid to really write creatively. They loved to teach it, they loved creative writing, but when they started to do it, what came out were cliches and things that they had read already. Like they weren't able to, or weren't ready yet to explore their own strangeness.
It wasn't
in a way.
authentic. It wasn't. It wasn't them. It wasn't visceral.
Yeah,
It was at a different
and
level.
it wasn't that they were
I get
deliberately not being
No, no,
authentic.
of course
It's
not.
So I developed this thing called permission to play with language,
Oh, nice.
and it was a program where we went step by step over the course of several days, walking into the deeper water.
Oh, interesting.
By deliberately writing phrases that were odd, by taking and juxtaposing elements that seemed to have nothing to do with each other, but that when you started putting them together and then building around them, started taking on meaning. The nature of, abhors a vacuum. Linguistically, that's true too, that when you put phrases together,
That don't belong together. So
yeah.
that would be a simile or a metaphor. Similar things are the same metaphor, so they're comparing things that are different, right?
Exactly.
So
It's very much in the ballpark of metaphor, but it's pushing it way out into left field. Not to stay there, but to just do it.
No, I
it's like
get
to
it.
paint an abstract painting. Just throw paint on the canvas. Maybe you want to be a landscape painter, but just to get used to
doing it.
freeing yourself up.
Right.
And then you come back, and maybe your landscapes are a little bit more a little bit more alive.
That's really interesting. It's almost like modern art to some extent, where you just allow yourself to picture things or describe things or put things out there in a way that's different than how you might do it otherwise. Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's
I
really
think it's very
interesting.
similar. I think it's the action of painting, say, that rather than necessarily trying to have a photographic
Memory.
a photographic image.
Description or
Yeah,
image. Got it.
Photography can do that, so painters don't need to be photographic anymore.
Right. I was out doing a plein air painting exercise one day, and
Oh, yeah?
somebody came up to us and were like, "Why don't you guys just take a picture?" Like, and we're like, "Well, that's the whole idea here, is to have that opportunity of interpreting it for ourselves and opening up our own minds and eyes and
Exactly.
feeling it in the air." And I had one friend who was helping me with art, and he was like, "What are the 3 things that you're feeling, Kate? What are the things that that you want to express with this painting. So, and that was interesting. It's like the bird is cold and the bird is maybe a little bit afraid, and so you try to paint that into that piece of work rather, and same, it's a different medium, but it's still expressing that which would not be expressed otherwise. So.
Yes, that which would not be expressed otherwise. I like that. Any kind of creative endeavor is creating something that doesn't exist yet, and then making it exist. So,
right. So what advice, Steve? I mean, there's just like all these books out there. What advice would you give to people who want to write? Is it just write? Just, keep your pen to the paper, or do you prefer keyboard? Like, what is your perception on that?
I always have a notebook and a pen handy, because I like to be able to write longhand, but I also mostly compose on a laptop now. But as far as advice to people who want to write, one of the most basic thing is don't wait to be inspired. People, I can't tell you how many people, when I tell them.
I like that. Don't wait to be inspired.
No, if you wait to be inspired, your tombstone might say, could have been a good writer. You know what I mean?
We don't want that. No way. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
But so many people I have met over the years say, I know I got a great novel in me,
then say it. Tell it.
I want to write poetry, but I'm so busy. So if you don't carve out the time, my friend David Capella and I, who's a dear friend and a poet also, Connecticut person, used to say to his students, you got to put your ass in the chair. Hope I can say that.
Well, no, of course. Yeah. And the same with teaching. Like if kids don't show up for the lesson, they're not going to learn what you have to say.
That's right.
And it's all about that.
That's right. Dylan has a line, got to get up near the teacher if you want to learn anything.
Oh, there you go. I like that.
Yeah, I like that
I like
too.
that.
Yeah.
Okay. So, we used to do stream of conscious when I was in college.
Yep,
And do people still do that?
Yeah, some. I have a few prose poems in here, which are basically stream of conscious, just what I call gush of language. And that feels really fun to do sometimes, because you suspend punctuation and you don't overthink it. You're basically trying to set up a channel directly from your unconscious mind right onto the page, and see what you can always edit it and fix it later.
Of course.
But to get that first draft down, a lot of times you will surprise yourself what comes out.
Exactly.
And it's good stuff because it's new, it's original, authentic.
Well, and therapeutic, I think.
And therapeutic too.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, Steve,
no fear.
we just have a couple of minutes left, so I want to make sure that you've said everything and have gotten your points across. You can show your books again if you want to.
Yeah.
Highway of the Spirit.
The Highway of Spirit and Bone.
Available on Amazon.
LaFora Books. By the way, if you want to see any of my other writings or paintings or music videos.
You have a website.
I have a website. It's www.StephenOstrowski, all one word, .org.
And Stephen is with a V, not a PH.
With a V,
Okay,
yeah.
.org. Okay, that's
and,
good.
One of the things I'm doing right now with either of these books is if you order it directly from me, and you can get the contact information on my website, I'm also sending along with the books a 5x7 original painting.
Nice.
Yeah, and some people like my paintings.
What do you paint?
Go figure. Everything.
Yeah.
Anything. Go to the website.
Okay.
You'll get a sample of it.
Okay.
But it could be really abstract, or it could be, figurative.
Seascapes, landscapes.
Yeah, but all with a kind of abstract edge.
I think I've actually seen some of them.
You probably have
yeah.
if we're Facebook friends, which I think we are. So.
Very much so. All right, well, thank you so much, Steve, again, for being on my show, and good luck with you in your career and your next publication.
Kate, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.